Near a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife and his 2 children. The boy's name was Hansel and the girl's Gretel. They had very little to bite or to sup, and once, when there was great dearth in the land, the man could not even gain the daily bread. As he lay in bed one night, thinking of this and turning and tossing, he sighed heavily and said to his wife, "What will become of us? We cannot even feed our children. There is nothing left for ourselves." "I will tell you what, husband," answered the wife. "We will take the children early in the morning into the forest where it is thickest. We will make them a fire, and we will give them each a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will never find their way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot find it in my heart to take my children into the forest and to leave them there alone. The wild animals would soon come and devour them." "Oh, you fool," said she. "Then we will all 4 starve. You had better get the coffins ready." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I really pity the poor children," said the man. The 2 children had heard what their stepmother had said to their father, for they had not been able to sleep for hunger. Gretel wept bitterly. "Do be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel, "and do not fret. I will manage something." And when the parents had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the back door, and slipped out. The moon was shining brightly, and the white flints that lay in front of the house glistened like pieces of silver. Hansel stooped and filled the little pocket of his coat with as much as it would take. Then he went back again and said to Gretel, "Dear sister, go to sleep quietly. God will not forsake us." And he laid himself down again in his bed. When the day was breaking, and before the sun had risen, the wife came and awakened the 2 children, saying, "Get up, lazy bones. We're going into the forest to get wood." Then she gave each of them a piece of bread and said, "That is for dinner. You must not eat it before, for it is all you will get. You will get no more." Gretel carried the bread under her apron, for Hansel had his pockets full of the flints. Then they set off all together on their way to the forest. When they had gone a little way, Hansel stood still and looked back towards the house. And he did this again and again, till his father said to him, "Hansel, what are you looking at? Take care not to forget your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my little white kitten, who is sitting up on the roof to bid me goodbye." "You young fool," said the woman, "that is not your kitten, but the sunshine on the chimney pot." Of course, Hansel had not been looking at his kitten, but had been taking, every now and then, a flint from his pocket and dropping it on the ground. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father told his children to collect wood to make a fire to keep them warm, and Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood enough for a little mountain, and it was set on fire. And when the flames were burning quite high, the wife said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest yourselves, children, and we will go and cut wood, and when we are ready we will come and fetch you." So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and at noon they each ate their pieces of bread. They thought their father was in the wood all the time, as he seemed to hear the strokes of the axe. But it was really only a dry branch hanging to a withered tree that the wind moved to and fro. So when they had stayed there for a long time, their eyelids closed with weariness, and they fell asleep. When at last they woke, it was night, and Gretel began to cry, and said, "How shall we ever get out of this wood?" But Hansel comforted her, saying, "Wait a little while longer until the moon rises, then we can easily find the way home." And when the moon got up, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the way where the flint stones shone like silver, and showed them the road. They walked on the whole night through, and at the break of day they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why did you sleep so long in the woods? We thought you were never coming home again." But the father was glad, for it had gone to his heart to leave them both in the woods alone. Not very long after that, there was another great scarcity in those parts, and the children heard their mother say at night in bed to their father, "Everything is finished up. We have only half a loaf, and after that is gone, our tale comes to an end. The children must be off. We will take them farther into the wood this time, so they shall not be able to find their way back again. There is no other way to manage." The man felt sad at heart, and he said, "It would be better to share one's last morsel with one's children, surely." But the wife would listen to nothing that he said, but scolded and reproached him. He who says E must say B too, and when a man has given in once, he has to do it a second time. But the children were not asleep, and heard all the talk. When the parents had gone to bed, Hansel got up and went to get more flint stones as he did before, but the wife had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. But he comforted his little sister. "Don't cry, Gretel. God will help." Early the next morning, the wife came and pulled the children out of bed. She gave them each a little piece of bread, smaller than before, and on the way to the wood, Hansel crumbled the bread in his pocket, and often stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, why do you keep stopping behind?" said the father. "I am looking at my little pigeon sitting on the roof to say goodbye to me," answered Gretel. "You fool," said the wife. "That is no pigeon, but the morning sun shining on the chimney pot." Hansel went on as before, and strewed breadcrumbs all along the road. The woman led the children far into the wood, where they had never been before in all their lives. And again there was a large fire made, and the mother said, "Sit here, and then when you're tired you can go to sleep. We're going off to the wood to chop more firewood, and in the evening, when we are ready to go home, we will come and fetch you." So when noon came, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewed his along the road. Then they went to sleep, and the evening passed, and no one came for the poor children. When they awoke, it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister. "Walk a little, Gretel, until the moon gets up. Then we shall be able to see the way home by the crumbs of bread that I have scattered along the path." So when the moon rose, they got up, but they could find no crumbs of bread, for the birds of the wood and of the fields had come and picked them all up. Hansel thought they might find the way all the same, but they could not. They went on all that night and the next day, from the morning until the evening, but they could not find their way out of the wood, and they were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but the few berries they could pick up, and they were now so tired that they could no longer drag themselves along. They lay down by a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's home. They were always trying to get back to it, but instead of that, they only found themselves farther in the wood. Then, around about noon, they saw a pretty snow-white bird sitting on a bough and singing so sweetly that they stopped to listen. When he had finished, the bird spread his wings and flew before them, and they followed after him until they came to a little house, and the bird perched on the roof. And when they came near, they saw the house was built of bread and roofed with cakes, and the window was of transparent sugar. "We will have some of this," said Hansel, "and make a fine meal." "I will eat a piece of the roof," said Gretel, "and you can have some of the window. That will taste sweet." So Hansel reached up and broke off a bit of the roof, just to see how it tasted, and Gretel stood by the window and gnawed at it. Then they heard a thin voice call from inside, "Nibble, nibble like a mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" And the children answered, "Never mind, it is the wind," and they went on eating, never disturbing themselves. Hansel, who found that the roof tasted very nice, took down a piece of it, and Gretel pulled out a large round window pane and sat her down and began to eat. Then the door opened, and an aged woman came out, leaning upon a crutch. Hansel and Gretel felt very frightened, and let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Ah, my dear children, how come you are here? You must come indoors and stay with me. He will be no bother." She took them each by the hand and led them into her little home, and they found a good meal laid out of milk and pancakes with sugar, apples and nuts. After that, she showed them 2 little white beds, and Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down on them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman, although her behavior was kind, was actually a wicked witch who lay in wait for children and had built the little house on purpose to entice them there. When they were inside, she would kill them, cook them, and eat them, and then it was a feast day with her. The witch's eyes were red, and she could not see very far, but she had a keen sense of smell, like animals, and she knew very well when human creatures were near. When she knew Hansel and Gretel were coming, she gave a spiteful laugh and had said triumphantly, "I have them, and they shall not escape me." Early in the morning, before the children woke up, she got up to look at them, and as they were sleeping peacefully with round, rosy cheeks, she said to herself, "What a feast I shall have." Then she grabbed Hansel with her withered hand and led him into a little stable and shut him up behind a grating, and call and scream as he might, it was no good. Then she went back to Gretel and shook her, crying, "Get up, lazy bones, fetch water, and
cook something nice for your brother. He is outside in the stable and must be fattened up. When he is fat enough, I will eat him."
Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was no good. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. And so the best kind of food was cooked for poor Hansel, while Gretel got nothing but scraps. Each morning the old woman visited the little stable and cried,
"Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may see if you have become fat enough."
Hansel, however, used to hold out a little bone, and the old woman, who had weak eyes, could not see what it was, and supposed it to be Hansel's finger. And though she was disappointed it was not getting fatter, when 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel seemed to remain so thin, she lost patience and could wait no longer.
"Now then, Gretel," she said to the little girl, "be quick and draw water. Be Hansel fat or be he lean, tomorrow I must kill and cook him."
Oh, what grief the poor little girl had to endure, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks.
"Please, God, help us," cried she. "If we had been devoured by wild beasts in the wood, at least we would have died together." "Spare me your lamentations," said the old woman. "They are of no avail."
Early next morning Gretel had to get up and make the fire and fill the kettle.
"First we will do the baking," said the old woman. "I have heated the oven already and kneaded the dough."
She pushed poor Gretel toward the oven, out of which the flames were already shining.
"Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it's properly hot, so that the bread may be baked."
But once Gretel was in the oven, the old witch meant to slam the door on her and bake her. Then she would have eaten her. But Gretel perceived her intention and said, "I don't know how to do it. How shall I get in?"
"Stupid goose," said the woman. "The opening is big enough, do you see? I could get in myself."
And she stepped down and put her head in the oven's mouth. Then Gretel gave it a push so that she went in farther, and she shut the door upon her and put up the bar. Oh, how frightfully she howled and screamed, but Gretel ran away and let the old wicked witch burn miserably. Gretel went straight to Hansel and opened the stable door and cried, "Hansel, we are free, and the old witch is dead." Then Hansel flew out like a bird from its cage when the door is opened. How they both rejoiced! How they fell into each other's arms and danced about. And as they had nothing more to fear, they went all over the old witch's house, and in every corner they found there were chests of pearls and precious stones. "These are something better than flint stones," Hansel said, as he filled his pockets. And Gretel, thinking she would be able to carry something home with her too, filled her apron full. "Now away we go," said Hansel, "if we can only get out of the witch's wood." When they had journeyed for some hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We can never get across this," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge. There is no boat either. But here comes a white duck," said Gretel. "Maybe if I ask her, she will help us over." So she cried, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel, on the land. Stepping stones and bridge we lack. Carry us over on your white back." And the duck came accordingly, and Hansel got upon her back and told his sister to come too. "No," answered Gretel, "that would be hard upon the duck. We can go separately, one after the other." And that was how it was managed. And then they went on happily until they came to the wood, and the way grew more familiar
till finally they saw their father's house. And they ran till they came up to it, rushed in at the door, and fell upon their father's neck. The man had not had a quiet hour since he had left his children in the woods. His wife had died,